The microphone crackled when my granddaughter tapped it, and I leaned forward in my chair the way you lean toward a fire you've waited all winter for, because this was the part I had driven 4 hours through March slush on Highway 17 to see. I want to tell you my name is Ruth Halloran, and I am 63 years old, and until that afternoon in the banquet room of a golf club outside Barrie, I believed that if you gave a child everything, the child would eventually turn around and see you standing there. That was the arithmetic I'd done my whole life. It does not always balance. I learned that watching my granddaughter accept the Halloran Family Achievement Scholarship, a scholarship I had funded, every dollar of it 12 years of automatic withdrawals from a teacher's pension that was never large to begin with, while she thanked, by name, in front of 200 people, a woman who was not me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And my late husband always said I told the end of a story before the middle had a chance to earn it. So let me back up. I taught grade 4 in Sudbury for 31 years. Long winters, short money, the kind of life where you learn to make a roast stretch to Wednesday and a winter coat stretch to 3 Februaries. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter because that's the only word that ever fit her, even now, was born when I was 25, and her father left us when she was 6. He didn't leave dramatically. There was no other woman at first, no slammed door. He just got smaller and smaller in the doorway of our lives until one morning the doorway was empty and the cold came in. He moved out west to Calgary and sent checks that arrived like weather, sometimes, never when you counted on them. So it was me. It was me at the parent teacher interviews, and me at the dentist, and me standing in the Canadian Tire parking lot in -30 trying to start a Cavalier with a dying battery so I could get her to figure skating before the ice time we'd already paid for ran out. I want you to understand, I didn't resent any of it. I would do all of it again. A mother's hours are not alone. I never once thought of them as something she owed me back. She was bright. Lord, she was bright. She got into Queen's, then law school at Western. And I remember the night she called to tell me she'd been hired by a firm on Bay Street. How she cried and I cried and we stayed on the phone not saying much, both of us thinking the same thing, that we'd climbed out, that the cold doorway was behind us for good. She married a man whose family had a cottage on Lake Joseph and a name people in certain rooms recognized. I liked him fine. He was polite to me in the way you're polite to a server whose name you don't intend to remember. They had a daughter, my granddaughter, and for the first few years I was grandma who came down on the train, grandma who knit the wrong colored sweaters, grandma who didn't quite know which fork. And here is the part I'm not proud of. I let it happen slowly. The Christmases got shorter. The phone calls got more efficient. My daughter started calling me Mum only when she needed something. Would I watch the baby? Would I help with the down payment? Would I? And Ruth, the rest of the time, the way you'd refer to a contractor. I told myself this was just how families went when they got busy and prosperous. I told myself the distance was geography. I was very good at telling myself things. 31 years in front of a chalkboard will teach you how to make a quiet room believe anything. The scholarship was my idea. When my granddaughter was 6, I sat down with the credit union in Sudbury and set up an education fund, and over the years it grew into something I was foolishly proud of, enough that the private school my daughter sent her to agreed to attach my family's name to an annual award. The Halloran Family Achievement Scholarship. I'd never had money to leave behind. This was going to be my mark. This was the one thing of mine that would outlast me. A thing with our name on it, sitting in the world doing good, after I was gone. I should tell you, too, about the lump. About a year before that afternoon in Barrie, I noticed a swelling on the left side of my throat, just under the jaw. I ignored it the way my generation ignores things, with a heating pad and a stubbornness that passes for strength. By the time I saw someone, it had grown enough to change the shape of my neck. The word they used was tumor, and then a longer word I won't repeat because it still tastes like cold metal. It was operable. It was, they were fairly sure, not the worst kind. but the surgery left a scar that ran from below my ear toward my collarbone, and it left my voice rougher, and it left my face a little uneven on the left. The corner of my mouth pulled down as if I were always on the edge of a frown I didn't mean. I told my daughter over the phone. There was a pause, and then she said, "Oh, Mum, that's awful," in the voice you use for a news story about a flood in a place you've never been. She didn't come. She sent flowers, a nice arrangement, and a card her assistant had clearly chosen. I sat in the recovery ward in Sudbury with a tube in my arm and read a card my own child hadn't written, and I told the nurse it was lovely. Didn't I have a thoughtful family? Recovery was long. When the school contacted me about the scholarship presentation that spring, they'd decided to make a real event of it, a luncheon, the achievement scholarship presented to the top graduating student, who happened that year to be my own granddaughter. I almost didn't go. The drive frightened me. My energy came and went like the checks used to. But this was the day my name, our name, would be spoken aloud in front of people who mattered, and my granddaughter would know that the soft landing under her feet had been built by an old woman in Sudbury, one pension withdrawal at a time. I wanted to see her face when she understood that. I bought a new blouse. I covered the scar as best I could with a silk scarf, soft gray, the nicest thing I owned. I practiced in the mirror tilting my head so the uneven side caught less light. Vanity, at my age, over a scar. But I wanted to be a grandmother that day, not a patient. I arrived early, and they sat me at a table near the back, which I understood. Family of the recipient mingled with donors, and I suppose they didn't know I was both. The room was beautiful. White linens, the windows looking out on a course still brown from winter, waiters in vests. My daughter saw me come in. I watched her see me, and I watched something cross her face that I have spent the months since trying to name, and the closest I've come is this. She looked at me the way you look at a stain on a tablecloth at a dinner party. A flicker of dismay, quickly smoothed, a decision made to simply seat the guests so the stain falls under someone's plate. She came over. She bent down. She did not hug me. She said low, "Mum, I didn't realize you look tired. Are you sure you're up to this?" And before I could answer, she said, "There's a coat check just there if your scarf's too warm." And she touched my shoulder once and was gone, back to a knot of well-dressed people by the windows, one of whom was a woman about my daughter's age, polished, expensive, with the kind of confidence that money buys early and never loses. I didn't know yet who that woman was. I found out when the speeches began. The headmistress spoke first, and then my granddaughter rose, 18 years old and luminous in a way that made my chest hurt, and she thanked her teachers and her coach and her parents, and then she said she wanted to thank one person especially, the person who had truly raised her, who had been there for every recital and every scraped knee and every late-night essay crisis. I sat forward. I felt the scarf at my throat. I thought, here it is, here is the moment. And I had told myself I would not cry, but I was already losing that argument. "My Auntie Cordelia," my granddaughter said, and gestured to the polished woman by the windows, "who's honestly been more of a mother to me than anyone. I don't know who I'd be without her." The room applauded. The polished woman, Cordelia, my daughter's husband's sister, I would learn, who summered at the cottage and lived 10 minutes from the private school, and had folded herself into their lives over the years. I was 400 kilometers and one pension away, pressed a hand to her chest, and gave a small, gracious, practiced nod. And then the headmistress returned to the podium and said how fitting it was, on a day like this, to present the Halloran Family Achievement Scholarship, and there was a small ripple of polite curiosity at the name, and my daughter who knew, who had always known exactly where that money came from, stood and accepted the framed certificate on her daughter's behalf and said into the microphone, smiling, We're so grateful to the school for this generous award. To the school. For the award. A man at my table, a stranger, leaned toward me kindly because I suppose I'd made some sound and asked if I was a relative. And I heard my own rough voice say, I help out with the family sometimes. I used to clean for them years back. I don't know why I said it. The lie came out of me like air out of a punctured thing. It was easier to be the cleaner than to be the woman whose name was on the wall, while her own child gave the credit to the school and the love to someone else. If they were going to erase me, I would hold the eraser myself. There's a kind of dignity in that, I told myself, and it was the loneliest dignity I have ever felt. I left before the dessert. I told the kind stranger I had a long drive. I walked out through the lobby past a glass case where, I saw now, they'd mounted a small plaque about the scholarship, the Halloran Family Achievement Scholarship, established through the generosity of an anonymous donor. Anonymous. They hadn't even let my name stand on the one thing I'd built to outlast me. Somewhere along the way, a decision had been made that the Halloran name was a brand the school could wear, but the woman was an embarrassment best left off the card. I drove home in the dark. Highway 11 North, the snow starting again past Gravenhurst. My hands at 10 and 2 like I teach the grade 4s. And somewhere around Huntsville I stopped crying and something else moved in. Not rage. I want to be honest, because everyone expects rage and rage is easy. What moved in was clarity, the cold, clean clarity of a person who has finally stopped lying to herself in a quiet room. I had spent my life handing my daughter the illusion that the ground beneath her was hers, the pension I'd drained, the fund I'd built, the name I'd offered like an open hand, and she had taken all of it and taught her own daughter that it came from somewhere else, from anyone but me. So I drove home and I did the thing my generation does. I got out the file folder. Here is what my daughter did not know, because she had never once asked. The scholarship fund was not a gift to the school. It was a fund I controlled, administered through the credit union, with the school as a beneficiary at my discretion, renewed by me every single year. I had structured it that way on the advice of a tired loans officer named, well, a kind man who told me all those years ago, Ruth, never sign away the last say. You keep the last say. I had the documents. I had every annual letter. I had, folded in that same drawer, the original loan against my own little house in Sudbury that I had taken out 2 years before, when the markets dipped, and I didn't want my granddaughter's last 2 years of school disrupted. I had remortgaged my home, the home I'd kept through the divorce, the only thing that was ever fully mine, so that the soft landing would stay soft. My daughter didn't know that either. Nobody knew. I had wanted it to be invisible. I had wanted to be the weather that just happened to be good. I did not do anything cruel. I want that on the record, because in the weeks that followed my daughter would tell people I had. What I did was withdraw the fund's renewal. I wrote the credit union and the school a calm letter on the kind of stationery a retired teacher keeps for important things, and I informed them that the Halloran Family Achievement Scholarship would not continue, that the controlling donor, me, the anonymous embarrassment, was discontinuing the endowment effective immediately, and that any future use of the family name in connection with the school's awards was to cease. Then I did the second thing, and this one I thought about for 3 nights before I did it. My granddaughter's final year of tuition, the one I'd remortgaged my house to cover, had been paid by me directly into an account my daughter administered, with the understanding it was for the school. I had the receipts. I had the canceled checks. When the school's bursar, confused by the discontinued scholarship, called my daughter to ask about the outstanding balance on the graduation year, the gap appeared. The money my daughter had told everyone came from the family's good fortune had in fact come from a remortgaged bungalow on a dead-end street in Sudbury. And now the paper trail of it lay across the bursar's desk like a thing that had been hidden under a rug and was suddenly, undeniably there. I didn't expose her. I want to be clear about that too. I never said a word to anyone at that school. I simply stopped being the invisible thing that held the floor up, and the floor, it turned out, had only ever been me. The calls started a week later. First, my daughter's husband, Smooth, asking if there'd been some confusion with the credit union. Then my granddaughter, texting, an actual text, a string of question marks. Then my daughter herself, and the voice on my answering machine was a voice I hadn't heard since she was small and frightened, a voice with the polish stripped off it. Mum, Mum, call me. Mum, I don't understand what's happening. People are asking questions. People are asking questions. Not, are you all right? Not, I'm sorry. People asking questions. I let it ring for 9 days. Then on the 10th, the knock came. It was evening, the snow finally gone, mud season, the bungalow smelling of the soup I put on. I opened the door, and my daughter stood there on the step where her father had once stood, getting smaller. And for a second the years folded over, and she was both of them at once, the man who left and the child he left behind. She had driven up from the city. She'd come alone. Her face was the face of someone who has not slept, and she had no speech prepared, which was the first honest thing she'd offered me in a decade. "Mum," she said, "why didn't you tell me? About the house? About the loan? About any of it?" And I stood in my own doorway, the warm soup smell behind me, and the cold spring air between us. And I understood that she had it backwards even now. She thought the wound was that I'd hidden the sacrifice. She still couldn't see that the sacrifice was never the point. "You didn't ask," I said. "In 38 years you never once asked." She started to cry then. And I'll tell you, the old me, the me who started the Cavalier in -30, who read the assistant's get well card and called it thoughtful, that woman wanted to reach out and wipe her face. That woman had spent her whole life mistaking the wiping of other people's tears for love. I kept my hands at my sides. I had taught grade 4 for 31 years. I know the difference between a child who is sorry and a child who is sorry she got caught. And I am not always sure which one stood on my step that night. I'm still not sure. I think she wasn't sure either. "I'll pay you back," she said. "The house, the loan, all of it. I don't want the money." And I realized as I said it that it was true. I wanted you to know where you came from. I wanted your daughter to know whose pension paid for her piano lessons. That's all I ever wanted. And you gave it to a woman whose summers at the lake. You can't pay that back. There's no account for it." She asked if she could come in. The soup was on. It would have been the easiest thing in the world, and 40 years of habit pulled at me like an undertow, to step aside, to feed her, to make the room believe the thing it wanted to believe. Instead, I held the door where it was. "Not tonight," I said, and then, because I am her mother and some part of me will be until I'm in the ground, maybe not for a long time. I don't know yet. For the first time in my life, I get to be the one who doesn't know yet. I didn't slam it. I want you to picture it gently. I closed it the way you close the door in a room where someone's finally fallen asleep, carefully, so the latch barely clicks. And then I stood in my own front hall, in the soup smell, in the little house that was mine, fully mine, mortgaged and reclaimed, and mine. And I put my hand to the scar at my throat, and I did not cover it. I'm 63. The voice they left me is rough, and the left side of my face won't smile evenly anymore, and I have decided I no longer care, because I have spent 6 decades being the weather, and I am done being the thing people are grateful happened to be good. The name still exists, the Halloran name. It's just that I've taken it back inside the house with me, where it can mean something again. I don't know if I'll forgive her. People ask me that. the few people I've told, and they ask it like forgiveness is a door you open for someone else. It isn't. It's a door you open for yourself, and you don't have to let anyone walk through it just because you've unlocked it. I've unlocked mine. I'm standing in the open doorway of the rest of my life, and the cold isn't coming in this time. This time, I'm the one deciding what does. So tell me, if it were your name on that wall, your house on that loan, your child giving the credit to a stranger, would you have written that letter? Would you have let the floor become only you, and then stepped back to see what was really holding it up? I think about it every night, and I still don't have one answer, and I'd like to hear yours. Stay with me, because the next story I tell is about the spring that came after and what I learned about the difference between being needed and being loved. Don't go far. I've had a lot of quiet evenings since that night on the step, and I keep landing on the same plain truth. Nothing that happened to me arrived out of nowhere. Every piece of it grew from a seed I'd watered myself. I taught my daughter, withdrawal by withdrawal, check by check, that the ground would always be there under her feet no matter how she treated the person holding it up. I called my own silence love. I told the kind stranger at that table I was the cleaner. You cannot teach a child for 38 years that your sacrifice is invisible and then act surprised when she can't see it. Cause and effect doesn't spare us just because we mean well. What I'd lost sight of, somewhere around the 3rd February of starting that cavalier in the cold, is that being good is not the same as being honest. I'd let myself believe that keeping the peace was a kind of decency, when really it was just fear wearing decency's coat. Real character isn't only kindness, it's the spine to tell the truth out loud, even to the people you love most, especially to them. I should have said, years ago, that money is mine and you will say my name. Not out of pride, out of fairness to the both of us, because a child who never learns where the floor came from never learns to stand on her own. And I think now that wisdom isn't cleverness or book learning, though I've got plenty of the second from 31 years in front of a chalkboard. Wisdom is finally seeing the pattern you're standing inside of. It took a banquet room in Barry and a word like tumor to clear my eyes, but when they cleared, I saw it whole. The loans officer who told me to keep the last say. The file folder, the difference between being needed and being loved. I'd had the information all along. I just hadn't had the courage to read it. That's the part I'd want a younger woman to hear if she's out there starting a cold car in a cold parking lot for a child who won't remember it. The strength that matters most isn't the strength to endure. I had endurance to spare. I could have endured being the cleaner until the day I died. The harder strength is the strength to stop, to close the door gently, to keep your hands at your sides while someone cries, to choose what comes in and what stays out in the cold. That kind of strength doesn't feel like power when you're using it. It feels like grief. But it's the only thing that ever gave me back my own name. I don't tell this story so anyone will feel sorry for me. I tell it because I spent 63 years being the weather, and I want you to be the one holding the door instead. Forgive if you choose to, but unlock that door for yourself, and don't let a soul through it until they've finally learned to ask you where the floor came from.